Today, we're speaking with Suzanne Lång, who lives in Sweden, but she truly is a citizen of the world. She has lived in 8 countries, including Denmark, Canada, my country, Japan, and South Korea. She was educated in hotel management in Switzerland, project management in Sweden. She moved to Sweden in 2006. Started coaching, training, and consulting in leadership development in year 2012. She's been focused on the nature of thought since 2017, and she uncovered the non-dual nature of life in 2020. She is fluent in English, Swedish, and Danish. And if that's not enough, Suzanne is a certified executive coach and a professional certified coach with the International Coach Federation. And as a professional coach myself, I think it's important to emphasize that those designations do not come lightly. They indicate a dedication to coaching. And as Suzanne and I spoke a bit about before our call, we've both been coaching I've been coaching for almost 20 years. And I know that when I first started, the industry was totally brand new. Leadership coaching was unheard of in my little city in Canada. And since then, it's taken on a life of its own. So I'm always gratified to meet another coach who has taken this designation of coach so seriously. Please join me in welcoming Suzanne. And now that I've dropped all of that information about who she is, I'm going to ask her to complete this sentence. And I didn't tell her I was going to do this, but I'd like her to complete this sentence. I am.
I am. Well, there's really no answer to that. I am, because everything that I put behind I am will just be a description of something, of a thought. And that's really where my whole work begins. That after the I am is just a thought. So I am, as we all are, everything really. We are the life and the intelligence and the consciousness and the peace that we know as a baby, I would say, that we are born as the everything, the not separate from everything. So that's what I would say with the I am. It's like the biggest question you start with is the biggest question we could ever ask. I am. What am I? Anything I say after that is just a concept. So that's where I would start. Yeah.
Well, I love that answer. And again, when we get beyond the baby stage, we often want to say, I am a career coach or I'm an executive coach. And you've reached a place in your life where that doesn't describe who Suzanne is at all. So let me ask you, what are you not?
Yeah, that's another question. What am I not? I am not my thoughts. I am not my feelings. I am not my behaviors. I'm not any concepts that I've ever thought about myself. I am really not anything that we place upon that, which is just the life that we are, the intelligence. It's not that it's not real. It's just that it is shifting. It's shaping. It can never be one thing. It always shifts into something else because it's made of thought. So whatever I say that I'm not, I could also it is really what we would think that we are. So yeah, it's really.
When I was a child growing up in small town Canada, there was an expression that I've been thinking a lot about lately, and the expression was, it's all in your head.
Oh.
And that was an insult.
Mm.
It was like, silly, you're being silly. But what I'm hearing you saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like, it really is all about what we're thinking and what we believe.
Yeah, that is really you touch the core of everything that I work with and everything that I've seen in my life. And it really is all in our head. Everything from how we see everything to how we perceive everything to how we interpret everything. It is really all in our head. So that's perfect. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And again, what we thought was an insult is really a deep truth.
Yeah.
Deep truth.
Unfortunately, it is a deep truth that we don't see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we could have a major discussion about why we don't see it.
Yeah.
But that can also lead to how you got to this place where you understand all of that, and how you work with leaders around consciousness and beliefs and thinking. So I know you indicated to me that, and we've just met,
Yeah.
so we're getting to know each other, and I felt a deep connection to you just by your writings on LinkedIn. It was like, oh, wow, I could have written that, or wow, I wish I had written that. Right? It's so beautifully written and displaying such a depth of understanding about human nature and consciousness. So I know you indicated to me that your world fell apart, I believe, when you were 36 years old. So let's start there, about that falling apart and how it has been the beginning of your story to where you are now.
Oh, what a wonderful thing. Yeah, thank you for asking that question. So when I was 36, like I said, my world fell apart. And as you said in the beginning, my mother is Swedish, my father was Finnish. So I was born in England, and my father worked for Finnair, the Finnish airline. So we moved a lot. So the first 4 countries we moved to was with my father. And then the last 4 countries, I moved on my own. I was in the hotel business, and I was so I've moved a lot and been in different cultures. Like I've been in Asia and America and in Europe. So always changing and always wanting to being a very confident, looking outwardly very confident, but inside not, and just wanting to prove myself all the time. So career, I was very focused, very performance, very just. Focused on being something, focused on being someone. It was very important to be someone, to prove myself, to prove that I can do this. My father was a successful businessman, and so I was constantly educating and moving about and but never really feeling it inside me. Just always so unsure. So just looked like everybody else figured it out. Everybody else has got this world figured out, and I didn't understand life like that. So when I was 36, I was living in Denmark, and my life kind of caught up to me, and the biggest fear that I ever had, being a big achiever and a high performance person, was losing my job, getting fired. How could that, that was like the most dreadful thing that could ever happen to me. And that's exactly what happened to me. And I lost my job. And at the same time that I lost my job, I got pregnant I got pregnant with the man who was not going to be in my life. And so really, I lost my job. And my whole everything that I thought was true about my life, just it was like a farce. It was like unreality. I just couldn't understand why my life would be like that, when I tried so hard to be good and to do good and to be popular and just to have people like me and just get promoted and earn money and be successful. It was like, and none of that came. Everything just fell crashing down. So I found it. I ended up in therapy because I just needed to know. I just couldn't understand. And I was grasping at straws and figuring, why can I not figure this out? Why do I outwardly seem so confident, but inside I'm just a total mess? And that was the beginning. And that's really where so on the floor, we sat on the floor. It was a different kind of therapist, but he was, what I now know is he was a bit non-dual at that time, but we were sitting on the floor, and he said to me at one point, he said, Suzanne, just because you think it doesn't mean it's true. And that was the beginning of the whole change, the whole shift. It would take another 17 years for me to fully understand what that meant. But that's really, and that brought me to coaching, that brought me to my own company. I mean, so yeah, that's really how I am where I am today. Just that one thing. I couldn't understand, how could my thoughts not be true? How is that possible? I never thought that thought. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I feel so much synergy with you. My story's different, but it's certainly my story. I've written a book, and I remember, as you spoke your words, I remember writing something very similar, like, how could this happen to me? I've tried so hard to be good, the good little girl that was, just be good, because everybody's watching the family, not because my family had status, but because it was a small town. And of course, anything that I did would reflect on the family. So just be good, because what would the neighbors think? That would be the theme of our little community. What would the neighbors think if you stepped out of line? So how is it that we can try so hard to be what other people think we should be, right?
Yeah.
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 So it all gets planted in childhood. This this sense of identity, how we quote unquote should be, and how we can please other people in lots of ways. So it took you 17 years to figure it out. And I know I read something you wrote on LinkedIn just the other day about the spiritual journey and how it's not a destination, and that's the words I'm putting on it. So as part of that 17 years of, let's call it unlearning,
right,
17 years of unlearning, and looking at the thoughts that populate our minds and our brains. Tell us more about that 17 years.
Yeah. So the first thing that happened in that whole thing was I reached for something spiritual, because I was not a religious, did not come from religious, but I could not understand it. So I reached for A Course in Miracles, actually, in 2000. Yeah, Course in Miracles. Yeah. And that was so, but I didn't know anything about it. I just heard through another book, a Debbie Ford book, called the Dark Side of Light Chasers, which was really a pivotal book for me as well. And then she talked about that. So I got A Course in Miracles, and I really, this is after my breakdown and everything. So I was sick. I was on sick leave, and I was pregnant. So I really had nothing to do but just sit and read. I was just trying to figure out myself, trying to get grounded and stuff. So I would read Course in Miracles as if it was just a normal book, thinking, how many pages do I have left and stuff. But it was speaking to me somehow. It was really speaking to me. So that was my first. And then it would take another. Yeah, I read that book for a long time. Anyway, it's as you know, it's a huge book. Anyway, that was kind of the start. And then I was doing a bunch of other courses. Always interested. I went to San Diego to study with Lisa Nichols. Wanted to do something with teenagers, because during my therapy I had learned so much, and I kept learning and I kept learning. So once you start tasting this, oh my God, there's so much. How interesting we are. I just kept I kept studying and reading, and my whole life from that point was really just about more, and it was all really about psychology and CBT and NLP, and then I studied, and I wanted to start, and I started my own company in 2012. I wanted to go out and teach and all this stuff, but of course I wasn't even. When I think back of it now, yeah, it was really pretty wild that I did that, because when I compare with how much I've learned now, just these past 5-7 years, since 2017. But anyway, I don't want to ramble on, but it took me to many things. Brene Brown was one of my big teachers and stuff. And then in 2017, I was listening to something called The Three Principles, which really just landed right in my heart, because I had been doing so much work on thought. The whole Course in Miracles is about thought. The first 50 lessons are really about everything, which I really didn't understand until 2017 when I got there. And then And that just changed my world. And then I was doing leadership develop. I had a program, and I was just working along with that. And then all of a sudden, I just couldn't do that anymore. I saw so clearly thought for what it was, and how it was not me at all. And I just couldn't teach, or I couldn't coach, I would say, in that way anymore. And I couldn't have a leadership development program that talked about conflicts and motivation and all these normal things that leadership development programs had, because I just saw everything that was all coming from in. It was all coming from inside. Yeah, feel free to stop me whenever you feel like it. Yeah. So then COVID came. So I kept on going, and I kept on teaching, and I kept on doing my leadership. But then COVID came, and luckily, within 3 days, 2 of my big events were canceled. So I had no income coming in, and luckily the government in Sweden let us be unemployed, even though I had my own company. And so that brought me to non-duality, because then I started taking courses from a woman named Claire Diamond, and that just brought me. So for 4 years, I was just completely immersed in the non-dual nature of life, which is the oneness that we all are. And eventually I was able to speak about these things, and now I started writing about them on LinkedIn a few years ago, and getting bolder and bolder, and as my understanding deepened, now it really is just it's the only thing I want to do. Just go out, and if anybody wants to listen to what I'm saying, they can listen. But if they don't want to, that's fine as well. Yeah.
Wow. So there's so much here around. First of all, Course in Miracles also has been a big part of my life, and I had no idea that we had that connection. And so I'd love to explore with you if you see any difference between the teachings of non-duality and Course in Miracles. And yeah.
Well, the Course in Miracles is one of the most non-dual books that there is. It even says, the world is an illusion.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, but the Course in Miracles, I love the Course in Miracles, and it really is about the mind. See, the Course in Miracles is about the mind. But then in about 5 years ago, I came upon a book called A Course of Love, which is, I don't know if you've heard of that. Yeah.
Yes.
And I thought, how could anything be better than A Course in Miracles? But that is a book that I have read every single night for 5 years. I had a friend in New York who used to read every single night, and it's just that. So Course in Miracles is for the mind, and A Course of Love is for the heart. So what it does is it turns the mind to the heart, so that we become wholehearted, so that we use both of them. So it's not just one or the other. So both of these are very non-dual books. They both, it's all about the conditioning that we have, the nature of thought, everything that I think I know can be found in those books. So in combination with many others. I'm not just saying that those are the 2 books, but of course I've studied all different kinds of.
So how does this work in your work? Because you said that you've become bolder and bolder.
Yeah.
So anybody, if there are any coaches listening, and I'm curious about this, of course, is how do you integrate this into your work with, because my sense is that you have 2 tracks. You have the individual coaching, and then which is more life coaching, and then the leadership executive coaching.
Yeah.
So how does that boldness play out in your work?
Yeah. Well, what I've really seen with my whole heart, with everything that I do, is that there are really 3 areas that I focus on. And that is the conditioning that creates the thinking, that creates the feelings, how that comes about, the nature of thought themselves, how thoughts are always shifting, how they come and go, how they are ephemeral, how they can never stay put, and how they are conditioned from our lives, from our experience. So conditioning and the nature of thought, and how those two combine to create the idea that we are a separate, there's a separate, like a Wizard of Oz, like there's a little wizard inside our mind that's separate from the whole thing that is somehow driving the show. So really, I say that it's individuals and it's leaders, but it really is the same thing all the time. And whether I have courses in companies, or whether I have private courses, or my whole program is built around these things, because I think that is really, once we see that, life changes. And I think that has been the absolute most important aspects, which is what I write about all the time in different ways, how those two, conditioning and thought, create the illusion, because it is an illusion, that there is a separate self in here driving the show. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like very important work to me. Very important.
Thank you. Yeah.
And it's what I'm about as well. So of course, that's why I felt so aligned with you and your work. So here's a question that I'm curious about, so I'll ask it. Do we need to have our world fall apart to wake up to the nature of thought and how we got here and how we can get out of it?
That is a great question. And I've asked myself that question so many times. And the only thing that the answer that keeps coming up to me is kind of. I think so, because yeah, because we just, until we're desperate to find an answer to something that we have no answer to, we are not willing to look in this direction, because it's scary. What I talk about here is scary, because we've pushed so much aside. Our whole lives, we've pushed that which we do not want to know about away. And this is what keeps popping up in us. We push it aside. It's like a whack-a-mole in like an amusement park. Push one down, it comes up another place. And unfortunately, because we're so conditioned, because this world is the way it is, the way we are conditioned, we learn in school with grades and look at your brother, why can't you be more like him? Or look at her, look at all these things she's doing, we learn that we're not enough. We learn that there's something in us that is not enough. And this is something that we all share, because we have the same. The world is operating on this premise that we are comparing constantly. We are judging and comparing. That is our whole, and that is the job of the ego, the separate self, And
well, that's right. It has a job, and its job is it's trying to keep us safe, because we think we're separate, because we've forgotten or chose not to remember that we are not separate. Then the ego takes on this wonderful job of trying to protect us and keep us safe. So it's important not to dismiss that, or take it for granted, or say it doesn't have value, because at some level it does have some value. And I like to say that I've trained in something called positive intelligence. So the goal is to weaken that type of thinking. And by weakening that thinking, we actually strengthen what I call an enlightened belief system. Because it's like there's these, even though we believe in non-duality, what you're talking about, I think, is that we're operating from two different belief systems. One that believes that it's important, the world is not safe, and therefore it's important to keep us safe, which most people would call it fear-based. And then the other thought system, which is that says, as you said, the world is but an illusion, and we are safe no matter what happens in the world. So it's the dichotomy between those two belief systems that we're constantly playing with. So Gosh, I talk so
Yeah.
much that I
Can I
lost my.
just say one thing on that, which is so good
Okay.
that you said there, because this it is fear. It's all fear. It cannot be anything but fear. These thoughts, because they have always their whole entire being compared and judged with others. That's how we've learned, by comparing. So this separate self is simply made of fear. And to go into, because the question was, do you have to fall apart? Yeah. And to look at that fear directly is terrifying, because the only thing that the identity wants to do is to survive. Like you said, it stays safe. So it will do everything to get away from this conversation that we're having here, me and you.
To maintain that false self, that false
Yes.
identity. Well, you've
Yes.
reminded me, I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Kenneth Wapnick, of Course in Miracles fame.
Yes.
And he said something to the effect that if your life's going along really well and you think everything is wonderful, then Course in Miracles is not for you, and probably the non-dual path is not for you either, because you're content. So it's kind of connected to that question of, do things have to fall apart? There's got to be some sort of necessity that says this is not, something has to change here, something has to shift, because things are just not working. The world, or whoever, our family, our community, told us that this is how it should be, and it's just not working anymore. So whether we fall apart emotionally or physically or however it is, something, I think, calls us forth.
Yeah, I think also there are of course people who hear something that find this so fascinating, because maybe something clicks inside them. They hear something a different way that they haven't heard before, and it just opens up like, oh my God, I never thought like this. So there probably are many people who don't have to have the breakdown. I think most people do, because it really, but seeing one little thing in this is really such a, it really is such a monumental shift. So that it could be fascinating for someone who doesn't have to break down to find it.
Yeah, to take a gentler path. I often say that, or I used to say a lot, that we get the little hits sometimes, and when that doesn't work, then we'll get a little bigger one, and then we'll get another bigger one, right?
That's what Oprah said. Then you get hit by a 2x4.
Yeah. Okay, I probably heard it from her. So, but it's true. It's true. We get the little nudges, and when we don't pay attention, we keep going and keep trying so hard to follow the rules that we didn't even make up. Somebody else made them up.
Yes.
So before we go, how's your daughter?
My daughter.
You were pregnant.
Oh, yeah.
So the man that you weren't going to be with. Yes.
No, she's the best. She's the best. I'm so proud of myself, because I can say that, because, everything fell apart before she came. And I really know that I read a lot from, there's a woman called Alice Miller, and although I've made many mistakes with her as well, of course, but I was always very aware that it was that of my own conditioning. So I was very aware of how I was with her. So I was alone with her my whole pregnancy, and really I've been alone the whole time with her. And she's 23 now, and she's just she's everything. She's everything that I really wish that I was at that age. Yeah, I can honestly say that with all of my heart. Amazing.
Beautiful.
Thank you for asking me about her. That's lovely. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm a mother, and now I'm a grandmother. So yes, I remember writing that I thought if I thought about who was the teacher and who would be the student, I of course would think that I would be the teacher. But I quickly learned that he was my teacher, and he came in. My husband and I often say, like, how do we get so lucky that to have this little person in our lives? So I get it. I get your pride. And I so appreciate the wisdom that you've shared with us today, Suzanne.
Thank you.
As I thought, we are kindred spirits, I believe.
Super
And
love.
yes. And so do you have any not little words of wisdom, but if somebody's struggling and maybe life hasn't knocked them down as completely as it did and as suddenly as it did with you, but they want to explore how to maybe be less stressed, less anxious, more at peace, what would you point them in a direction, or what would you say to them?
I can feel my heart kind of beating because that is such a big question. But it is really underneath the thought, underneath all of the chaos that's happening, underneath all the thoughts, there is peace, there is quiet. We have noticed it. And if we could sit and just try to witness what is going on here without, I know it always sounds crazy for somebody who hasn't heard these things, but to really notice who is it that's listening to what's happening, these thoughts, what is it that's noticing these thoughts, what is it that is noticing the banter, I'm good, I'm bad, I'm good, I'm bad, what is it that's behind all that? And that's probably not the best answer I could give, but it's the one that came to me right now. So there is peace, and there's so many fantastic teachers out there. To start with, Byron Katie is one of my favorite teachers as well. Rupert Spira, Francis Lucille is probably one of my favorite teachers as well. So there are so many wise and wonderful people who you can listen to. But to start with, go to the peace in yourself, because you are that peace. That is who we are. Yeah.
Well, if somebody's listening to this who hasn't asked themselves the question, what is it that's observing and listening?
Yeah.
Do you want to give them the answer, or do you want to do you want them to find it for themselves?
I don't know that I could answer that. These are the words would just, yeah, this is the thing about being human. We can only communicate in words, and that's good, that's fine. There's nothing, it's not bad or it's not good, but it is the baby who is born has no concepts, has no words to describe things. The baby that is born is one with everything, has no idea that there's a mommy and a daddy. Go back to that. That is what we're always searching for, because that is what we know. That is, everything else is then layered on top of that knowing of the oneness, knowing of the love. Every baby just wants to be loved and kissed and hugged, and doesn't matter how the hair looks or if there's food all over the face, they just want to be loved. And this is what we spend the rest of our lives searching for, that peace that we feel as the baby that is born, that knows who it is, that is a child of God, if we want to use that word. Yeah.
I understand that the word God has so many meanings, so many different.
Yeah, I didn't even supposed to say that word because it really
came up. But I can verify with certainty that Suzanne doesn't mean the God that many religions teach. So let's leave it at that. Yes, let's leave it at this idea that children come in not knowing about separation.
No, they don't.
Because as a grandmother, I see that, it's like when the child first noticed, when the baby first, they hold up their hand.
Yeah.
Like, what is that?
Yeah. Yeah.
They are totally in the oneness. They live in the moment.
Yeah.
They want to scream in the middle of the night. They do.
Yeah.
They don't care. They don't care, because this is the feeling I'm having, and I'm going to express that. So, wow.
No right or wrong. There's no right or wrong.
No right or wrong. We're back at the beginning. And I want to thank you so much. And I'll put some of your recommendations. I've never heard of Francis Lucille?
Yeah, Francis Lucille.
If you want to send me a few links of those teachers. I'm certainly familiar with Byron Katie, so we'll include those. But yes, thank you so much, Suzanne.
Thank you. So what a lovely conversation. Thank you so much.
Well,
For
thank you.
inviting me, for having me. I'm so.
Oh my goodness. Again, I just knew that this woman has wisdom and that we share a lot of the wisdom. And it's been an absolute pleasure and delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.